Hi, my name is Mike Moody, and I welcome you to the Moody Coda YouTube channel. This whole video streaming thing is new to me, so I ask for your apologies, lack of eloquence, and what have you. I am a ServiceNow platform developer. I've been working in the industry for over 8 years, and I've worked with managed service providers in the past, multi-domain separated instances. And today I work for eBay as the team lead, architect, and ServiceNow developer. So today I just wanted to go ahead and actually share something new that I had to develop as a requirement at work. And so what was being requested by the user was they wanted to have an experience in the service portal where they could have the ability to do a multi-select of multiple answers from a question. But then also, once those selections are made, they want to be able to have the ability to provide additional information, but not just a single input field of additional information, but additional information pertinent to each one of those specific selections. So what I did is, and I'm going to show you now and try to build this out, is I came up with a thought, an idea to essentially implement a list collector experience to give that multi-selection capability in combination with a multi-row variable set that will allow them to input additional specific information for those selections that they've made. So I have my personal developer instance open here, and what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and get started by creating a new catalog item. So I'll do that now. All right, so we're going to create a new catalog item here. And I'm just going to call it something generic, test catalog item. Seems good enough to me. Let's be a little bit more specific. Let's see, testing list collector with multi-row variable set. Let's do that. A little bit more specific. All right, so go ahead and submit this item. Okay. Now from here, I'm going to go ahead and define my variables. So I'll start by creating a list collector variable. Now, and this is another thing that I found to be quite useful. So, you know, if you want to have a sort of a multi-select experience with a list collector variable, but you don't want to necessarily have to define a new table, so by default, it kind of forces you to do so. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. So if you go to a list collector type of object and you go to the type specification, here they're asking you to specify what is the list table. So in most cases, I think they're expecting that you will create a custom table and populate that custom table with your records of choice that you want to be able to select from this list collector. Since I don't want to go in and create a new custom table, I just want to add some custom answers somewhere in maybe an existing table. I figured the best way to do this is to use the built-in question choice table, which, interestingly enough, you know, if you create one of these list collector fields, you don't have visibility to it. But if you use other field types, you do. So first of all, let me show you what I'm talking about. So if you do a lookup selector, actually select a select box, and let me just do this as a temporary variable here because we're not going to keep this. So you go ahead and submit a select box type variable. Once the form reloads, you're going to see here at the bottom you have that you're provided with the ability to add custom question choice answers to the select box list. So I could do, you know, choice 1, choice 2, etc. Right? So then, you know, when this manifests itself on your catalog item, you'll see those choices in your dropdown. Now, unfortunately, what you don't get presented with this related list option to create these choices when you're using a list collector type, because it's expecting you again to target a table, and it derives its records from that table. So, but what I actually want to do is I want to use this question choice table to hold the answers that I want to show from my list collector variable. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'll leave this window open here, which is showing me, giving me access to this question choices table, and then I'll go in and I'll define my list collector variable to target that choice collection table. So let me do that now. So we'll do a list collector, and we're going to set our question up to be, just for demo purposes here, we will ask the question, what is your data categorization? So let's say we're like collecting, we're trying to give some approval or something for a certain type of data that we're sharing. So we will call this data category and ask that question, what is your data categorization? And our type specification, actually I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, make sure that you can see what I'm doing. So our type specification here, the table that we're going to target is going to be our question choice table, and that's this top one here. Okay, and then for the reference qualifier, what we're going to do is we're going to type question equals, and we're going to use the sysid of this variable that we're in the process of creating. So we say question equals this variable. So let's go ahead and submit this. So now we have that variable created here, but what you'll notice is that we don't have a related list of the questions that we can specify, or the answers that we can specify for this question, like we did in our temp variable here, where you can see that at the bottom of question choices. We don't have that experience here. But what we can do now that I targeted the same question choice table, is I can go now to the list view that I had open directly to the question choice table, and right here from the list view I can add my choices that I want to provide for this question. And so all I got to do here is override this question with the new one I just created, what is your data categorizations? And then I can start defining the choices that I want to expose for answers to that question. So we'll do public as a type of data. And we'll make this the first choice. We'll do 100. Price is not applicable here, what we're doing. Do save. And then also do confidential as a type of data. And we'll have that be the second choice. Do an insert and stay. And then finally we'll do restricted as a third choice, and do insert and stay. Okay, so we now have, if we go back to the question choice table, and of course, we're seeing a lot of things, all the stuff that's in here right now, but let's zero in on this question that we care about. Oops. Let me just jump back real quick to here and grab my question name. Come back here, paste that in. There we go, and do run. So we can now see in a separate list view here, we can see this our list of questions. And then what you can do is you can sort of add this as a left nav link query to your left navigator, so that you have a place you can go to administer and add new choices, or remove the existing ones, or modify them. So now with all that set up, let's go ahead and just quickly test out this catalog item. So I'm going to copy the sysid real quick. I'm going to go to the platform view, and then I will modify the URL to do SP for the service portal. All right, so from here, I'm just going to go into the service catalog, open up any random item, and then I will just override the sysid in the URL to target the item that I'm working on. So here's my test item here. You can see there's this temp drop down here with the choice, but then here's the list collector that I set up. And now you can see we have controls at confidential, public, and restricted. So now you notice that actually these are in a out of order here. There's actually a variable attribute you can add. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what that is, but you can look it up in the documentation to specify which field in the target table you want to use to order your choices. And so this you can implement that that attribute on the item, and then it will render according. You can specify the order field to render that appropriately. So let's see, now that we have our list collector here, so the next requirement that was given was that, so we need to be able to select one or many options in this choice, but then when we do, we need to be able to provide additional specific details about each one of these respectively, and not like as a whole. Under normal circumstances, you might just expose a multi-line string input field below this to just collect additional information, but in this case they need to call it out per. So what I had a thought to do is, let's go ahead and create next is a variable set, but we're going to create a multi-row variable set. So let's do this, and we're going to name it similar to what we named our data category here. So this variable set, okay, so we need to click here and click new, because this is actually an intermediate many-to-many table here. So I'm going to do a multi-row variable set, click add, and the title of that, I'll just give data category detail as the title. Copy that. Actually, that's going to be my internal name, and I'll make the title a little nicer, so we'll call it data category detail with spaces and capitals. All right, and then go ahead and submit this guy for now. Okay, and then I'll submit here. So I now have defined against this catalog item this variable set data category detail. Need to open that up and actually specify the variables that we're going to have within this variable set. This is a multi-row variable set. So I want to create two variables. One of them we'll call, let's see, data type, which is going to correspond to the selection they made in the list collector. So this will be data type, and the type of variable we're going to use in this case is actually going to be a reference variable. And then we're going to be targeting our same question choice table here, question choice, just like this. And then from here, we're going to want to apply a reference qualifier condition where our question, in the question choice table is equal to the question that we are working on here for our primary variable. What is your data? So this is the question that's associated, this is referring to the list collector variable, that particular question. So we come back to here to this reference qualifier, and we can specify that. All right, so that is set. And let's go ahead and submit this as is. Okay, so that's one variable in our variable set. And our second variable in our variable set is what we're gonna use to collect that additional information, right? So what we need in addition to the data type is we need them to provide us with a list of data elements. So this we're just going to create as a string input field. So we'll just call it data elements plural. Okay. And this is going to be, we'll just do single line text. Now you can make this multi-line text as well if you expect there's going to be a large number. I think in this particular case, single line text should be sufficient, and we'll order this as the second variable in this variable set. So let me go ahead and hit submit. And actually, in this case, and in both of these variables in this variable set, we do want to make them mandatory. So let me go ahead and submit this. Let me go back and modify this first variable, the data type variable, make that mandatory. Okay. So now we have our variable set up with two mandatory variables in it. And we actually want to render this after the list collector. Let me remove our select box because we don't need that anymore. That was just to show you how they render the question choices. And then I'm going to update the order for the list collector. I'll put that at 100. I will put the variable set at 200. Okay. Let's do this. So now let's take a look at our item so far and see what that looks like. All right, so let's refresh here, reload. All right, so what we have here now is our list collector, of course, right? Very good. And then we have our new multi-row variable set down here, which if you've never used this, if you just click the add button, this will allow you to select from those three options that we had above, and then provide our list of data elements, for example, name, and add that. That's cool. That's nice. But what we want to do here actually is we want to have the system automatically tie these two variables together and take care of, as we're making these list collector selections, automatically adding those selections to this variable set list down here as dedicated rows, obviously with the data elements not populated, because that's what needs to be provided by the requester who's going to be submitting this form. So that's our next step. So let me see here. So we'll go back into Studio, and under the catalog item, we'll want to go ahead and create a couple of catalog client scripts to control this behavior. So the first one we'll create is we'll be responsible for hiding and showing the variable set on demand as needed. And I already went ahead and wrote this code, so I'll just do copy paste. You don't have to watch me type it in. So here's a hide and we're going to change this to our field type. So we'll say data, what do you call it? Data category detail. Oh, already got that right there. So we're going to hide the data category details, right? And so we'll need to make, let's zoom in a little bit here so you can see the code. And I'll walk you through this. So we're going to need to make a couple changes in this code here. Specifically, we need to change the target variable set ID value. So that's what this is here. This is going to be controlling the visibility of the rendering of this variable set table, multi-row table down here. So to do that, we need to get the internal name of that variable set, which if you remember when we were creating it, let's see, the variable set internal name is right here, which we have defined as data category detail. So let me go and copy that out and then replace this in the script here with data category detail. All right. So now that we've updated that, we're going to call this, we already got the name set. So let's go ahead and take this. This is going to be an on-change client script as well. So we'll go back here. We're going to set the type to on-change. And we're going to be targeting that data category list collect variable. I'm going to apply it to all things here, our catalog, requested items, and catalog tasks. And then the UI type, I'm going to select all to make sure it works in the service portal as well as on the desktop. And then I'll just replace this code here with what I copied from my script editor. And so now we should be all set here. Actually, yeah. So one of the things that we could add here, and we'll come back to this. Right now, I'll just leave it there because it's not going to make any difference. But I'll come back to this code in a minute to enhance this a little bit later to maybe ignore certain selections, for example. So let's go ahead and save this. All right, so now this should be running on change. Notice also I have commented out the return when it's loading, because we wanted to actually hide um, the variable set on load as well as on change. So if you didn't know, the an on change type of catalog client script as well as regular client scripts, you can handle the loading state during with one of those functions as well, because it actually gets triggered when the form is initially loaded, as well as whenever the target field in question is actively changed or not. So we want this script down here to evaluate in both use cases. So essentially what we're doing is we're using the gform get value to grab the target multi-row variable set by internal ID. We're then checking that value to see if it is not equal to undefined, or if it's not equal to empty. Then we want to show it. We want to go ahead and set the display to true. Otherwise, if it's undefined or empty, we're going to hide it. So we'll set display to false. Okay, so that's the gist of that. So with that in place now, we should be able to test that out. So if we refresh this, reload, it is now hidden, right? And if I select, it's still hidden. So in the current state of things, we can't unhide it because we have no way of populating data into that table. But that's going to change. So our next step here is we want to create another catalog client script. So let me just refresh that and click new. So our next client script is going to be responsible for actually setting the details or setting the values in the details as the list collector is updated. So we will call this set data categories details. All right, and again, we want this to be of type on change, targeting the same field, the list collector field of data category. Apply it against all, and set the UI type to all. Okay, so now let me go in here. So it looks like we need to, so this one I've kind of made it a little easier here, where I have some variables at the top. All I gotta do is change these variables. So the target field name, this is the target variable or field that exists within the variable set, that's going to be essentially synchronized with the list collector value. So in this case, we called our field, I think it was data type, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just confirm real quick. So in our variable set, yes, we have a data type field. So this is the reference to the choice, the question choice record that is being also referenced by the list collector. Okay, so we want to set that as our target field. And then our target variable set, again, it's going to be data category detail. So I will replace that there. And then this we're not using at present. I'll come back to that. So, so that should be all that's needed here for this on-change client script. So now let me go ahead and copy paste this into the body of our script here. Okay, go ahead and hit save on this. And then I will demo this for you now, and you'll see how it works, and then I'll go through line by line what that script is doing. So reload. So now we come in here, we select one of these options like public. Look at that, it's magic. So now it's programmatically inserting a new row into our multi-row variable set table. That is setting the reference to the same value that we selected in the list collector. So we can select multiple, we can select for confidential, we can select for restricted. You can see those are automatically added to the table below. And then if we remove confidential, yeah, look at that, it removes it. Public, we don't want anymore. So we got dynamic interaction between these two variables. It's pretty nice, huh? So with this, you may have a use case, and I had this, where perhaps you want this interaction between these two fields to be applicable only with certain selected values. Let's say that for confidential and restricted, we definitely want them to provide the data element, but maybe we don't care as much for public. So when public selected, we don't want that to show as a row down below. So in that case, what we can do is let's go to our list of questions. I think I still have this open. Here's our list of 3 questions, and let's grab the sysid of this public question here. So let me just right click on this row, copy sysid, and then jump back to the code that I had real quick. And let me replace, for both of these, actually let me go through the studio here. So let's go back to our client script, the first one that hides the data category details. So we don't want to show it when that particular choice is selected. So I'm going to override the sysid that you see here inside of an array. So what this is saying here is basically if the value of what is in our data category detail variable set, if it looks like this, which is essentially saying if it's an array that contains just this one value, which is that public value, sysid, then we don't want to show it. So this if it's not equal to that, then we don't want to show it because we're not going to be adding a row for that value. So if the array looks like that, it only has one entry and that one entry is public, then we don't want to show that, right? So let's go ahead and try that first and hit save. So we'll update that. And then the other thing we need to update is in our other client script, there is that other variable I had up the top here. I said I'd come back to you. So this is the same thing. So if we replace this sysid with the public choice sysid and then save this record, we should now see the behavior reflecting what our goal is here, which is essentially if I select just public, nothing happens. There is no, the table's not rendered because that value is no longer being added. But if I select confidential or restricted, those are added now. So public has no bearing on that table now in this case. So we're able to exclude that from the synchronization logic. So that's a cool enhancement. Now let me go in a little more detail on the script that's controlling the synchronization between this, and that's primarily this the second client script that I had implemented here. So I go through this a little by little. So we set up 3 variables at the beginning. So we got the target field, which is our data type field in the variable set. That's going to be our reference field that aligns with the reference that's used on the list collector. And then we have our target variable set name, and then that one record that we wanted to ignore. So the first thing we do is, and I'll just say as a disclaimer here, this is functioning code. It is very likely that it could be improved and enhanced as far as readability and performance. So I'll just throw that out right there right now. So anyhow, checking the new value if it's empty, or if the new value is only equal to that that public value or that one choice, then we want to hide. We want to essentially, I'm sorry, not hide, but this is controlling the value that's being set in the variable set. So we want to do a set value on the variable set name, and then we want to set it to an empty array, because this is how a multi-row variable set store their values. They store it as an array of sysids that is, or actually, I'm sorry, it's an array of JSON objects to be specific. A JSON object in a structure that matches the fields that you have inside of your multi-row variable set. For example, if I wanted to programmatically set the value of that multi-row variable set to set the first field to the value of public, for example, which is the one we actually excluded, we would want to provide an array here that says, our target field name is data type. So it would look like this: data type So that's your field name, and then you'd have a colon, and then the value. And the value in this case, if we were using that public one, would be the sysid of that public choice record. So if we set, and we took this here and set this as the value to our multi-row variable set, then you would see a row rendered with just that one field populated. Now, if you wanted to programmatically populate the description field, if you had that data in advance, then you would add that here as well. Actually, I don't think we called it description. We called it, let's see, what did we call it? It was data elements, right? So if you wanted to populate that, maybe you had access in advance to some of the data elements information. You could do it like this, and you can provide some of those, or that every one of these is going to have a name, right? So you could just pre-populate that as well. So this is how you would essentially specify a value for a multi-row variable set. So what I'm doing here is just supplying an empty array to clear out the value, because if our we're basically, our new value here is representing the value that is in our field that we're watching for changes, and that is our list collector field. So from the list collector, if we see nothing's there, or maybe just the public choice is there, we don't want to set the value on the multi-row variable set. So we're setting an empty array. Else, if there is a value there and it's not that one, then we want to do some fancy stuff here. So we're going to get the current value, because here's the thing: if you just, we could simply do a straight G-form set value and push in the values of everything in that variable set, I'm sorry, in the list collector into the variable set. But if we did that, every time there was a change to the list collector, it would overwrite any customization. So we need to retain whatever's currently there. So that's what the bulk of this logic is doing down here. So we're getting our current variable set by name. We're defining an empty JSON array. We're going to parse the current value of what's in that variable set into that JSON array. Then we're going to show the table. We're going to make it visible. Then we're going to parse the choices from the new value field, because the list collector is a comma-separated list of sysids of all the choices you've selected in that list collector. So this is going to now be an array of all the choices that currently exist in the list collector field. We're going to iterate over each one of those choices here. And what we're going to do for each choice is we're going to check whether or not that choice is currently in our parsed JSON array object. So we're going to iterate over the properties of that, and we're going to check on each JSON array element to check the target field, which we defined as data type, to see if it is equal to our current parsed choice. And if it is, then we say, oh yes, that is in the array. So we set that to true. And then after iterating over all the properties of that JSON array, we will check to say, we're going to add the choice to the array if it's not in the array. So again, we're gonna also do a secondary check here to say, make sure that as long as this choice is not that one that we're filtering out, then go ahead and we're constructing an object string, a JSON string by hand here. So we're starting the object here. We're escaping our double quote. We're going to substitute in the target field name again, which is data type, data underscore type. We're going to close off that that quotation. We're going to add our colon here. Oops, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do another quote mark, and then we're going to put in our parsed choice value, and then we're going to terminate that and stop that line. And then what we'll do is, once we have that string built, we're going to do a JSON.parse to convert it to a JSON object, and we're going to push that into our JSON array object here. Okay, so we're building this, I would say we're adding to the existing JSON array that we object that we parsed from the current state of the variable set. So we get the current state of the variable set here, then we're going to push into that same object a new row, which represents the choices that currently do not exist in that array. Then the last thing we need to do is we actually need to remove the choices from the JSON array that no longer exist in the list collector. And that's what this bit of code is for down here. So to do that, I essentially instantiate a new JSON array here, and then I iterate over the existing JSON array, which includes our additions and what is currently in the variable set. So I'm iterating over that, checking each one of those elements, and then for each of the parse choices that I'm working with, I'm doing another comparison here. We were going to check to see is our current list of parse choices in the array or not. And so we iterate over and we look for each of the JSON array properties. We make sure that it's not null, that and then that the field here is not null, and then we're going to check for to parse. We're going to check the string value of our parsed choice that we're looking at, the specific choice, and we're going to say if it equals the JSON array's element target field value, then it is indeed in the array. We're done checking for that. We can break out of that loop. And then if it is in the array, we skip because we don't want to add this to the new array, right? Oh, I'm sorry, if it is not in the array. And this is actually the key part right here, because this is what's going to remove the element. So we basically see if that element is not in the array after having iterated over all the elements in the array and checking for that data value. If it's not found, then we're going to skip. We're going to do nothing, essentially. If it is found, then we're going to go ahead and push it into the new array. So at the end, we're essentially going to have a new JSON array populated with just the rows that correspond to what's left or what's existing in that list collector field. And then at the end, I'm just checking the array length to see that it's greater than 0. And you know, if it is, then I'm going to go ahead and push the value into the array and it's taking, you know, the set value on the G form expects a string input, so you have to use a JSON.stringify of the object. So I'm taking that new JSON object array, which has the new elements and the removed elements updated, and pushing that as a string to the target variable set field. And then at the end, I'm going to get the target variable set again, and I'm going to make sure it's not undefined, make sure it's not empty, make sure it's not just an array, and then if it's none of those, then I will set it as a mandatory field, because when that table is shown, I do want that to be forced as mandatory. So that's the bulk of the code there. Now you can take a look at this code. I'm going to go ahead and publish or deploy this to source code control, and I'll leave that link on this video as well, so you can take a look at that. So that's basically the logic behind that script. So now with all of that in place, just to demo one more time, let me just go ahead and refresh this, reload. So we've got ourselves a nice multi-selecting list collector field that is ignoring public, but when we provide confidential or restricted, it will automatically insert those records for us. Then your user can come in and they can do their edit. They can add, you know, the information that they want to have you know, confidential. Maybe a home phone is one of the fields that would be confidential. You know, marital status, for example. And then here for restricted, maybe we have, you know, social security number or something like that. So this would be how that works. And then, you know, if we say, oh, you know what, we actually don't want confidential, you know, we're not going to include those data elements at all. Anyways, I can just remove that and it'll remove it from there and still retain our restricted. So there you go. There you have it. That's what I recently built, and I thought I'd share here in this video. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to leave it. And I hope you enjoyed this video and it was useful. And take care. Thank you for watching.